Welcome to a very special edition of Dhaka Tribune Presents Straight Talk. I am Dhaka Tribune editor Zafar Sobhan, and my guest today is Tanvir Haider Chaudhury, a very eminent man in his own right, but here today on December 14th in his capacity is the son of 1971 martyred intellectual Mufazzal Haider Chaudhury. Mr. Chaudhury, thank you so much for being on the show with us. So I know this must be a difficult time for you. This is a difficult conversation for you to have, but you've written very movingly about December 14th and what it has meant for you, what it has meant for your family, what it has meant for the nation. Could you perhaps today, like I said, I know it's going to be difficult, if you could talk us through a little bit about that fateful day in Bangladesh's history?
Well, you know, I was just 4 years old. My birthday is on the 14th of November.
Yes.
So that day in 1971, I was 4 years and 1 month old, exactly. And, you know, that's very young.
Yes.
And you don't, of my father per se, I don't really have that many memories before that day. But I do think I recall that day quite well. You know, because of the shock,
the enormity, the change in your life after that.
Yeah, life changed, and we've been over it so many times afterwards.
Of course.
Also, so that day, like, stands out in stark relief for me.
Yes.
And you know, what I remember is that these young men came in. We were living with our uncle.
Yes.
My father's youngest brother. Mufazzal Haider Chaudhury, and so his family with his wife and my 2 cousins, and my brother and I were there, and my mother obviously was there. And these young men came in with their faces covered, with handkerchiefs tied on their faces, and they spoke Bangla, and they said that, you know, we just want to have a conversation with sir, our teacher. And they said, addressed him as sir, and said that, we would just take him away for a little bit to the military barracks, and they would just have a conversation, and we would presently bring him back, and I mean, he's our teacher, so we would make sure that no harm came to him, etc. And at a certain point, one of these young men who were speaking, the handkerchief fell off that person's face, and my uncle, my father's youngest brother, and my father himself both recognized him. And my mother, I have heard this story many times. She passed away in 1990, so
yes.
I have heard this story many times growing up. And then my aunt actually is on tape as having said this, that this young man was Chaudhury Moinuddin. And
he was had been your father's student. He was well known to the family.
There
was no doubt as to his identity.
And he was also working for the daily Purbodesh,
yes.
And he was, and my uncle, my father's, the middle brother, Zafar Haider Chaudhury, he was the news editor for the Purbodesh then.
Yes.
Okay, so he was a colleague of Zafar Haider Chaudhury's. So the entire family knew him well.
Yes.
So there's no
question,
scope for
no doubt.
any ambiguity here. So he was recognized, and he said, I mean, so he put the handkerchief back on, and he said, I will make sure that we bring sir back. So that's something I remember. And then he was taken away, and the older people started crying, and we, in young children's bravado, we were saying, what are they crying about?
Sure.
And there's only a few guns. They actually had weapons with them, so it's only a few guns. And we were obviously familiar with guns, having seen them on television shows, etc.
Right.
So yeah, so that's what it was. I mean, I remember that day well. But I mean, for the life of me, when I try to remember my father's face, I can't remember the face. I remember, try as I might, I can't seem to remember my father's face.
Yes.
If I try very hard, then it turns into one of those photographs that you always see, and I've been seeing over these many years. But what I do remember is, I remember the sleeves of his dressing gown, because we had this apartment in the university campus, and he used to have, he had this habit of, he had this easy chair where he would sit down and he would smoke his hookah, and I would possibly get into his lap. I was 2.5, 3, I'd get into his lap, and I would look down. I would look to the front, and I would possibly see his sleeves all the time.
Yes.
Which is why I remember the sleeves.
Of course.
Right? I remember episodes like, he would always come back from from his classes, and my brother and I, brother was 3.5 years older than me, so we would run to him and we would ask him, what have you brought for us today? And he would always be the same response, but we would just do it for the heck of it.
Yeah.
We would, he would say,
it's a little ritual.
Yeah, a little ritual that we had, and he would have this bunch of belly pool that he would bring in the right season, obviously.
Yeah.
And he would put that on the table and said, and he would say, "Akbuk bhalobasha,"
Yeah.
Just full of love. And we would be sorely disappointed, of course, because what is that?
Yeah. You're hoping for something.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I can imagine. I have a 4-year-old son myself. I just can't imagine being torn away from him at this. It must be. Afterwards, the days and the weeks and the months afterwards, do you have any memory of that? And sort of as it became, you realized that he wasn't coming back?
For a long time afterwards, things just, it all meshed into, the months just, kind of molded together. And what I remember was this like pervasive air of sadness in our house.
Yeah.
Because we would, from very early on, I just instinctively kind of, understood that, our household was not like other households.
Right.
And I cannot, I can't throw tantrums. I can't, I can't insist on having things my own way. My mother was a very lively person.
Yeah.
And she was a huge fan of Rabindranath Tagore.
Yes, well, of course.
She loved his music, his poetry, his prose. And, I remember even within all that, I remember, electricity failing and, it being late at night and us staying up and she singing to us, etc. And I used to be a critic of her singing voice, but,
As one always is with one's parents.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, it always, all of this comes back to me. So it cannot have been all sad.
No, of course. And as you've written, you said, with childhood, we always have happy memories as well, however difficult the situations are, which is one of the marvelous things about childhood.
And we growing up, we also knew that there were many other families like us because we grew up on the campus.
Yes.
So many people were abducted from the campus.
That's right.
So we knew, and we had this kind of fraternity of these families where we gravitated towards each other and we knew each other well. So it was and the other families who were there were very nurturing and very kind, and so for a long time we didn't. Of course, there's something missing and there was an air of sadness, but it was not as bad as one would think.
No, I can imagine, as you said, this is something which perhaps this was, after all, 1972. The entire nation was recovering together.
That's right.
In its grief, but also in its joy. We'll take a break now, but please join us after the break. I'm here with Tanvir Haider Chaudhury, and please do join us. Thank you. Welcome back. Thank you for being with us. This is Zafar Sobhan on Straight Talk with Tanvir Haider Chaudhury. Tanvir, so you've been talking a little bit about the immediate aftermath of 1971, growing up as a child on the campus, many other families similar to yours. Tell us a little bit about the following years, how it was perhaps growing up in Bangladesh and then seeing so many of the people who are guilty of these crimes not being brought to justice, and certainly in the case of your father and with many of these others, this was, there was a great deal of evidence. This was very well known, and it was no secret who were behind this. And how was that? How were those, did that make things more difficult? Was that, could you talk us through a little bit of that, those years?
I think, I have written a little bit about this also, that a lot of these families, what happened, of course, is like crushing blow. You're the head of the family being abducted and killed, and people of this stature.
Yes.
So there's a a vacuum that cannot be filled.
Yeah.
But then what also happened was the country changed, as you were alluding to.
Yeah.
And you almost became defensive of your own stature as, you know, a member of a martyred person's family. So, you know, I mean, I remember, I mean, my mother passed away when she was 58 years old, 1990. And those were very different times from now. You know, now you can, now you can say Pakistani Sena Bahini, and you can say Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and, you know, I mean, at least the paraphernalia of the Mukti Juddho and the spirit of it, you know, is there out in the open. But back then it was a very different time.
The late 70s, the 80s, they were very
different times. And I remember I think I remember, you know, my mother's heart broke that day on 14th of December 1971. But I think whatever little, you know, I mean, she soldiered on for 18 years, 19 years. But I remember, you know, I mean, we were given an apartment along with all the other martyred intellectuals families by Bangabandhu and, you know, the university administration for 15 years.
Yeah.
And the understanding always was that this would be renewed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And a lot of martyred intellectuals families or other martyrs families actually got a permanent place to stay in, right? And we were like anybody else. I mean, we were young children. These were, I mean, as I've also talked to you about and we've written about, you know, they were in their 40s. All these intellectuals, and they were in the middle of their lives. So they were not expecting to die. And so they hadn't made, you know,
these kinds of plans. Why would they?
Yeah, exactly. They had no assets or anything. So we were, I mean, my mother was 39, and so we were, you know, I mean, we did not know what to do with ourselves.
Yeah.
And so 15 years, and so 1986 it ended. Then it was extended for 2 years, but those were different times, Eshad regime, etc. So we were continually being told by people who lived in the campus, by whoever could say a word to my mother, that we should leave. And we were very young. We were still studying, etc. I was in Dhaka University, so was my brother. And so we were continually being told that we should leave. And there was this father of a friend of mine who was an influential teacher. My mother went to see him, ask him for, you know, because he was involved in syndicate, etc. So so she went to see him and to ask him whether he could do something about extending, you know, the term of our stay. And he said, because, you know, my mother was very involved with the Mohila Shomiti.
Yeah.
And then certain people from the Awami League, in particular, I remember Shahara Khatun.
Yes.
You know, they were very involved with Awami League as with Mohila Shomiti as well. So they were very close, and everyone knew that. And, you know, I mean, our present Prime Minister is actually a student of my father's, and she has always respectfully remembered my father, etc. And she remained on like close terms with my mother.
Yes.
So everyone knew that they were, you know, they knew each other well. So he said that, you know, you have all these connections, use those connections. No one in the university will do anything for you. And, you know, all of this contributed to, you know, I think what happened to my mother eventually, you know, because
she was very young too.
She was very young. And so all that, it was an uphill battle.
Yeah. And
very different country, as I've been saying. And then you saw later on, I'm glad my mother did not live to see this, but the Mutiur Rahman Nizamis and all these guys becoming ministers and flying our flag and so forth, you know, and that was soul crushing.
Yes.
That was soul crushing. And at that point in our lives, we did not, I think none of us, you know, I mean, none of the progeny of the martyred intellectuals of 1971 at that point expected that we would live to see a day when these people would be tried in independent Bangladesh and they would receive punishment. So we did not. I don't think we dared hope that it
was so different. But so tell us a little then about how important these war crimes trials have been in terms of not just for you as a family and the other families as well, but in terms of Bangladesh as a country regaining its soul.
Well, you know what? I mean, we talk a lot about, whether the war crime trials were beyond reproach, But I mean, could Bangladesh have continued as a going concern, really? Could it have sustained? Because these people were against the very idea of Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's all very well to say, well and good to say that I ethically I am against capital punishment also. But in a situation like this, where there can be a change in regime every 5 years, and then the next regime can come in and
reverse everything. Slate clean.
Reverse everything, and these people can be made ministers again, etc.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Yeah.
I mean, what are the options?
Yeah.
And I've talked to human rights lawyers who said, some of them are actually involved with this cause, and they're aware of what happened in Bangladesh, and some of them actually have the same opinion.
Well, I would say this, that at the end of the day, Bangladesh as a country does have the death penalty.
Yeah,
and people
exactly.
are sentenced to death for far lesser crimes. That being the law of the land.
The law of the land being what it is.
Yeah.
If evidence supports they're receiving the highest penalty on a particular crime, then I mean, so be it. I mean, I don't celebrate people being, I mean, I celebrated Shahidul Alam's being set free.
Absolutely.
I do not celebrate people's being put to death.
Absolutely, it's never a happy occasion.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if the law of the land supports it, so be it.
I agree. We'll take another break right now. We'll come back and talk about this a little bit more after the break.
Sure.
Please join us after the break. This is Straight Talk with Zafar Sobhan. Thank you. Welcome back. This is Dhaka Tribune presents Straight Talk. I'm Zafar Sobhan. My guest today is Tanvir Haider Chaudhury. We were talking about the war crimes trials and what they meant to Bangladesh. And I mean, here's the thing. Specifically with the case of Chaudhury Moinuddin and your father's killing, it seems to me that the evidence there is extraordinarily strong. And there can be no question about that. And I think it's a very good thing that this sentence was passed. That must have been something you and your family were working towards for many years. How did it feel when it finally? I think it was in November 2013, if I'm not wrong.
I think it was around that time. Yes. Yeah. I mean, obviously and the other tragic thing, I mean, apart from the fact that my mother wasn't around to see that day.
Yes.
My brother, who had actually given a written deposition to the International Crimes Tribunal in 2011, I think it was around August, he passed away in December of that year.
I see.
And that's a whole different story. So he did not live to see the day when this man was sentenced.
So it's only been you then?
It's just me. I am the only one. But my father's youngest brother's son, who was actually 8 years old in 1971. Right. So he was there also,
right.
And he has vivid recollection of it.
He was the lead witness, if I'm not wrong, in the case.
So he went, and we went together, and I will always be in his debt for what he's done. Iftikhar Haider Chaudhury. He went and he testified. I was there with him. And so I mean, of course, it is closure. It is, but the man is there in like hiding in plain sight, and he is a prominent citizen of the UK, and we all know, right?
Yeah.
Prince
I'm shocked. I mean, I'm shocked that even after all of these revelations, and there's so much abundant evidence of his crimes, that he can still retain any kind of a position in a country such as the UK.
I don't know either. I don't know as a nation whether we've done enough.
Okay.
Because Obviously, there's this extradition thing where we have death penalty, so the UK will not extradite, but they have extradited terrorists to countries that have the death penalty.
Yeah,
there is that.
They do that, absolutely. So when they want to, they can.
Exactly.
Yes.
So whether we've put enough pressure on them,
Yeah.
whether we've been as strident as we need to be, as far as that is concerned, I don't think we have.
Yeah.
There are people, involved in the movement in London, whom I'm in touch with, and they do what they can. There's a Ganojagaron Moncho chapter, there is Ghatakdar Nirun Committee chapter, etc.
Yeah.
We're in touch with those people, and I don't think we've done enough.
So in a sense, and the fact that it happened when it happened, I mean, if it hadn't happened now, if it hadn't happened over the last few years, as you mentioned, you're the last member alive of your family, everyone's in their 40s and 50s, they're getting on, it would have been too late. It was just really just in time.
And the witnesses and the evidence, so much evidence has already been lost.
That's
witnesses
right.
have died out, so many of them have. And so I mean, I don't know, if not now, then I don't know how it would have happened.
Yeah.
I actually have written something on this at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the only regime that could really have done it.
Yes.
Because they wanted to, whether it was because it was politically expedient or whatever it was, they're the only regime that could really have done it, and this is the only time that it could really have happened.
No, I mean, I think it was so important for something like this to have happened. I mean, 2 days from now is going to be December 16th. We talk about the victory day, victory of Bangladesh, but I think December 14th is so important because it tells us two things. It reminds us of the cost, the price of that victory, but more importantly even then, it also reminds us of what the stakes were. I mean, one hates to use words such as, a battle between good and evil, but I think in 1971 it was that.
Oh, absolutely.
There was a right side and there was a wrong
Absolutely.
side. And this is what we are fighting against. People who would do such a thing.
Absolutely.
Such as happened on December 14th. Rounding up people, taking them away 2 days before the armistice, 2 days before, and torturing them and killing them. I mean, this is what we were up against. In a sense, it really says everything about what 1971 was all about and why it was so important to fight that war.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And which is why I think, I mean, this amorphous concept, ekattorer chetona, that we talk about, I think an essential part of that has to be the freedom to express yourself.
Yeah.
Because you can't, how can you talk about that when you have a situation where people are not able to express themselves, I mean, that is the crime that they were hunted down for.
Of course, and so many of these people, your father included, were intellectuals and scholars and writers and thinkers.
Because because they upheld certain ideals, because they thought in a certain way, because they were putting those ideas down on paper, and they were able to influence hearts and minds. So this is, I mean, so that freedom has to be there. If the Bangladesh that we are living in is to live up to the spirit of 71 that we talk about, I mean, that freedom has to be there. That's something I feel very strongly about.
I agree with you 100%. And on that note, thank you so much, Tanvir Haider Chaudhury. It's been wonderful having this conversation. I really appreciate your being on the show with us today. Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Dhaka Tribune Presents Straight Talk with Zafar Sobhan. My guest has been Tanvir Haider Chaudhury. I hope you will join us again next week. Thank you very much.